Yes, thank you, Matt. I have a portfolio of jobs, and clearly not ordained because I work way too much. But I think my title takes the whole 20 minutes of this lecture. So we're talking about why inappropriate or abusive coaching behaviours take place, and we're not going to focus so much on the abuser, the coach that is actually abusing. That's a whole different area. We're more interested in how can this actually happen in an environment. Yesterday it was announced in America that a university coach, Terry McKeever, she was just fired. She's been in the university as the coach for a good 25 years, and there's just been a report made that she's been abusing, I'd say, harassment, bullying, verbal abusive conduct since at least 2010. It's 12 years ago, like for a whole 12 years, and she's been like making these behaviours, and it's been allowed to go on. But we see it all over the place. So it's kind of, how does it happen? Now, in Iceland, there's cases of or questions about inappropriate coaching behaviours. We've also seen it in swimming, both in Iceland, also in Denmark, everywhere in America. Gymnastics, whether you're in America, whether you're in Britain, I think in New Zealand there was also British cycling. It's like everywhere. And then it comes the question of like, just how can it happen? What is going on in the environment that these things can take place? And that is what we are kind of looking at today. Like Havren said, I'm a former Olympic coach. I'm the current national coach. If I could go back 20, sometimes when I hold talks, whether it's about this or whether it's about culture in sport, I'm often critical of coaches. And that shouldn't be taken as an attack directly on coaches. I can talk about myself. If I go back to how I was 20 years ago as a coach, I really needed a mentor. I really needed help 20 years ago. I was an Olympic coach at the age of 28. I was a good coach, knew a lot, ambitious, but man, I did loads of bad things or like things that I could have done better. I used passive aggressive coaching methods. I wouldn't describe myself as maybe like abusive, but I needed support. Now, 20 years later, one of my jobs in Finland is to actually work with a new generation of elite coaches, mentoring them. So we're actually providing new coaches coming up that extra support. Sometimes we need extra help, someone to talk to when we run into problems rather than trying to figure it all out ourselves. This is on the weekend. Marino is a good example of a coach that uses many inappropriate coaching behaviours. If we take the last sentence here, he came to one player who he had come to distrust and walked past him without offering his hand. It was the power of the gesture. It was stung more than a slap in the face. Passive aggressive. I'll talk to all of you people. You can be in the corner. I'm not talking to you. That athlete complains, and then the coach says, "What? I didn't say anything." Exactly. You didn't say anything. So you can be inappropriate in many different ways, and that results in this harassment and bullying because you don't always have to say anything to be a bully. Question for everyone here, and it's not something that we need to provide the answer with here, but I think you should actually take this question home to your clubs or where you work, and what is the worst behaviour that is accepted in your club? It's actually a question that we also use when we're trying to understand what is the culture in your own club, but it actually relates very much also to when we try to understand maltreatment, abusive coaching. I was visiting a club not so long ago, and the coach said to me that, because I work in power swimming, he said, the only disabled athletes we have are the redheads. Yeah. And like, in one level, you're like, okay, I kind of get the humor where you're kind of coming from, but because like we know that people with red hair actually do get bullied and abused. So, and then it comes the question of, do I say something and let the person know that is actually unacceptable, or do I allow it to be there, and therefore I've created a new worse behaviour. Now, obviously, in some places, the worst behaviour is much worse than somebody describing redheads as handicapped, but it's still not acceptable. So I have a responsibility to myself to therefore do it. So ask this question every now and then, what is the worst behaviour in my environment? And then every time you start to see something that you think is unacceptable, you're more likely then to jump in and grip in. Like I said at the start, we're not particularly concentrating on the abuser, we're more interested in the environment. And research has shown that the reason that these things happen can be from an interpersonal level, an organizational level, and in terms of policies, and also from a societal level, that the environment allows this mistreatment to take place. And we're going to look at some of those things so that you can also go back to your clubs and be more aware of where are the possible areas that these things could take place. So if we take organizational policies, this idea of cash for medals is one of the reasons, or one of the underlying causes for why abuse actually takes place. British Gymnastics, they've had a case from around 2012 up until around 2018-ish. And the report came out last year, the White report that came out, and said that the gymnasts were starved, body shamed and abused in a system that ruthlessly put the pursuit of medals over the protection of children. Sad thing is that when we take the case of Danish swimming, we could, instead of writing British gymnastics, we could write Danish swimming, and instead of gymnastics, we could write swimmers. Exactly the same practices going on. And particularly this idea with body shaming and like controlling how much athletes eat and how that is done, and the manipulation, it is like, we just see it again and again and again. But in Danish swimming, it was at the National Training Centre that it all began back in around 2003, 2004, but continued until 2012. So a 9-year period of systematic abuse that was, everybody knew about it. And but this negative training culture was maintained and reinforced by Team Denmark that provided the money. And Team Denmark, they, from their point of view, when leaders within the Danish Swim Union said that we need to change the coach, that there is abuse going on, we know there's abuse going on, then there came from Team Denmark's point of view, they couldn't accept that we had to get rid of, or not we, but the swim union had to get rid of the coach. Because the coach was creating a lot of medals, creating a lot of new athletes that were doing the job. So the problem there, like on an organizational level, was that the two main coaches that were very abusive in Danish swimming, that from an organizational level, they spread their abusive methods into the clubs and also into the junior national team. So everybody started behaving like the national coach, because the national coach, the first one was from Australia, in the very old school methods of coaching, and the club coaches started to mirror his behaviours, which you can understand. Team Denmark says this coach is the man, the person that we should be working on. He is creating results. He is going around the clubs telling everyone how to do it. And therefore, all of a sudden, you get from an institutional, organizational level why it can happen. But there were also systematic failures within the governance, which we can talk about perhaps later, as to why it continued to be allowed. We can also, on this interpersonal level and in the clubs particularly, we can also look at the socialization of parents and how that also... My question has always been in this area is, how can it happen that parents accept and implicitly support this maltreatment of their own children? Because what happens is that the parents say, no, this coach is fine, even though abuse is taking place. And you're kind of going, well, how can that be? Well, it's about socialization. And we have to understand that when parents come into a new environment, a new club, or into the club, a lot of parents don't have that knowledge and understanding of how should it be. Some parents maybe have a background themselves in sport, but maybe they also experience what we would consider today mistreatment and abusive coaching. But parents often don't have the knowledge, so they don't understand what a talent development environment that is ethical looks like. So they come in new, they're going, okay, we're in the best club in whichever country it is, and they go, okay, this is how it is. They just don't know, they don't have any reference points, they don't have the knowledge. But they also actually believe, when they come into the club, that the club is actually following national standards. Like we heard what's going on in Norway, there's a charter about how we're meant to behave. So the parent will assume that the club is following that charter, how a club is meant to behave. ESE has the same here in Iceland. But are they? Are the clubs actually following the charters that are laid out? And is anybody policing it? We then have the parents trust that the club is monitoring how the coaches are behaving. Now, in many cases, if it's the head coach, if the head coach is the top dog in the club, and the parents who sit on the board are just parents, then maybe the club just doesn't know or have the knowledge to understand that the club is actually performing inappropriate behaviours. But the parents trust that the club knows what they're doing, even though the club or the leadership doesn't do that. And finally, we all want to enter into a situation where we have faith. We want to believe that when I take my child to play school, or when I take my child to the swimming club, we want to have faith. We don't start out with, I wonder if this coach is abusive. We want to believe that the coach is actually behaving in an appropriate manner. So, and that the coach has the best interests of their child. Unfortunately, what we find is that there are many coaches, the coach has their own best interests at heart. They want to be the elite coach, they want to create the results, and they'll just work with children and throw the children, get the children to do whatever in order to they get the results. So socialization, we have trust in the institution as parents, we believe in the methods that are taking place, and ultimately we start to embrace this abusive cultural environment because that's the process of socialization. Research is showing that parents that query and question, they're asking other parents, is this right? Is it okay that the coach is always screaming and shouting at our kids? And then the other parents will go, because the other parents have been there longer, they go, oh yeah, this is just how it is. This is the way to success. And then the new parents go, oh, okay, okay. And then after a while, it's them that are saying to the new parents, no, this is just normal. So, but that's how it works. We then have another problem in this socialization process is that those parents that have now learned that this is okay, they then become club leaders. They go into the board. And so they've embraced the abusive culture because they've been told all along that this is fine. They become club leaders, and then they protect that abusive culture. I was hired 4 years ago at a club in Denmark, and 2 weeks after I'd been in the club as club chef, then there was an extraordinary annual general meeting because the board who had hired me had decided a while previously that they wouldn't renew the contract with the coach because there were too many noises and voices saying that the coach was using inappropriate coaching methods. For example, weighing athletes in front of everyone else, and not only that, but then pressurizing athletes to change their eating habits in order to conform to how an athlete was meant to look. And there was other issues as well, of bullying. So the club decided that they were not going to renew the person's contract because there was something not quite right. One of the parents, or two of the parents, they decided that, actually what I heard was that their teenage children said, well, if my coach leaves, I'm going to quit swimming. So those two parents then said, well, that's not okay because I want my child to continue. So they overthrew the club, became the new chairman, and renewed the contract of the coach. And then around 4 months later, I was in charge of the daily operations. The same noises came up again. The swimmers' gymnasium called me and said, Brian, we have one of your swimmers. She's 16 years old or 17 years old. She's sitting in my office. She's crying because of the abusive coaching that she's receiving. I go to the school. This doesn't happen every day, as you'll appreciate. I go to the school, talk to the girl, talk to the school leaders, and then go into action. I call a meeting with the chairman and the vice chairman and say, this is what's happening. It's starting again. No. This is just a misunderstanding, Brian. The coach is fine, Brian. They didn't want to do anything. I write a letter to the whole board pointing out what had happened and said to the whole board that this was unacceptable. And 4 weeks later, I got fired, which I kind of knew was happening when I wrote the letter, but I wanted documentation. I contact the swimming union and tell them that this is happening, and I get a reply 3 months later. And why did I get a reply 3 months later? They said, apologies for the late reply, but we're dealing with our own abusive coaching problem in Danish swimming, and we don't have time to deal with your problem. So you can kind of see how these things kind of just keep repeating themselves. Coach authority, and this is where I can get critical, or at least I'm very wary today about who I hire as a coach in my club. The dominant authoritative coach. We've all met them. The coach that says, only I know how it is done. If you don't understand what I'm doing and what I'm saying, it's because you don't understand. So until you can understand all the knowledge that I possess, you should just sit there and be quiet. The last one, really hate this one. So if one of my coaches in my club says the last line, they're out of there. Because if you can't disagree, if you say, and as a coach, if you say, I will make your child great if you do everything I say, hell no, you're not in my club. But I think we've all met these kind of coaches. And then they just like take over the environment. And such an authoritative coach, they can dominate the board because, again, many boards don't have the knowledge. And that's fair enough. They don't have that experienced board members. They're often just parents with other skills. So then the coach's vision and worldview becomes the board's perspective, and that's how the board then supports that abuse. We also get on the other side with athletes. The authoritative coach gains a lot of respect and trust from the athletes because there comes an element of fear, but also the dominant coach that says, you just got to listen to what I say, do what I say for the next 10 years, and I'll make you great. And then what can happen is that the athlete can become vulnerable. Now, clearly, there's also, if you say that I will make you great to a 12-year-old, that's where you come an issue of abuse. If you say that to maybe an adult, there might be a different situation going on. But I think it's just dangerous. So normalization of the maltreatment, these are just coaching techniques. We see that a lot when we read the reports where abusive coaching has taken place, is that the maltreatment, particularly emotional maltreatment, is just considered a coaching technique. And it's not. And then the question we'll come on to later is how can we deal with that? But there comes this rationalization. This was a young international athlete, a young woman, she was saying that I don't get treated like this in school. I don't get treated like this at home. But when I go to my sports club, I get abused, I get harassed, I get bullied, but everyone gets the same treatment, so it must be normal. So even though they know it's kind of in one way not normal because it doesn't happen in school, they just then start to believe, well, it must be that must be how it is. So then we come into, well, what can we do? And then avenues to voice our concern. The research, when they've looked at it, is that the daily opportunities for parents to actually voice their concerns are very limited. And research is showing that sometimes parents try to encourage their children to speak to the coach. Well, as we've kind of shown, that's not going to really work. And when parents try to talk to the coach, they become considered the problem parent. And then the coach will go to the board and say, we've just got this problem parent that's complaining about things. And if you talk to other parents, then often that becomes difficult. We saw in the Weinstein case in America with the movie producer that everybody knew, but no one wanted to be the first one to speak out because it might affect their own careers. When enough people started to speak out, then the snowball effect happened and things started to change. One of my questions for you guys here in the audience is that what is your club's relationship to parents? In the coaching office, how do coaches talk about parents? Is it, Maria's parent is a pain in the ass? Or is it, Maria's parents got some issues, so we need to listen to them and try to understand where that parent's coming from so we can try to actually take a discussion. I know a lot of coaches that really would be happy if parents disappeared. And I think we need to change that. I try to bring parents close. Any parent's got a problem, I say, great, let's have a coffee. And let's sit down and I will listen and then try to reflect about what I hear. And that is the way to work with parents. So, access to training. How many more minutes do I have? I don't know, because I forgot when to look. Yeah. Anyway, access to training. This is another issue. There are some clubs that ban parents from training, or they say parents can come once a month to watch their kids train. This has also been shown in the research and in the reports that this has been used as a way for coaches to abuse, harass, use inappropriate behaviours. And if you say to parents, you can come once a month to look at the training, well, what does the coach do? They're really nice once a month, and then they continue to do their own training. I have big problems as a club chef about banning parents, because I want more eyes in a good way. I'm not saying that my coaches are using inappropriate behaviours, but why not have extra eyes watching? It's fine. Then you get coaches saying, "Oh, well, my athletes can't concentrate if their parents are in the stands watching." And my reply is, well, if you can't hold the attention of your 10-year-old, 13-year-old, 16-year-old, then you need to look at your coaching methods. If your swimmer or your athlete wants to look at their parent, then what 13-year-old or 15-year-old wants to spend time with their parent in training? You've got issues with your coaching methodologies and techniques, so don't blame the parents for it. And I sometimes teach kids like 6-year-olds. I live next to one of my swimming pools. If we need a swimming coach for the 6-year-olds, I will sometimes help out. And sometimes I'll be teaching, and then a parent will come over and try to tell their kid what to do. And I'll just say, hey, it's fine, the kid's fine, you just keep watching and we talk. It's 10 seconds. Safeguarding is becoming more and more. Most federations, most organisations are introducing safeguarding policies. This is just an example from Sport England. And half of safeguarding policies are about how you can, whistleblowing, or who you should contact if you have concerns. What we found in Denmark is that they tried to, within swimming, to have a whistleblowing ordering. But it's like, who's going to pay for it? How are you going to follow it up? It's not easy to actually, on a practical level, to do that. Clubs should be having their own welfare officers, or whatever you want to call it, that actually there is a process for, if you have concerns, you can go and talk to somebody and something can happen. The Olympic Committee, they have Athlete 365. They have an online safeguarding course which is free, which we should encourage all our athletes to take those courses, and it provides athletes with an understanding of generally what is appropriate or what isn't appropriate. So that's one really good step that you can take. So what we need to think about also is that we don't want to just have procedures for when it happens. What can we do to stop it happening? Or what can we do that we can speak up when it's just starting to happen, when we start to think this is not right, rather than waiting 12 years for something to happen? So leadership, whether that is head coach, if the head coach is not the person doing the maltreatment, but leadership needs to take a lead. And I think they just need to, be adults. The parent that I met that became chairman so that his kid wouldn't stop swimming and hired this coach, grow up. That's what I would like to say to the guy. It's be an adult, take a step back. You have to take responsibility. Your job, if you're in the board of a club, your role is not to think about what is best for your child. Your role is what is best for the club and for all the members of that club. Leadership needs to be aware of these issues of normalization and socialization. And that could be courses that are held from a federation to parents that go into the boards. And we also need to understand, or board members need to understand, that their understanding of the world is quite limited. So we need to educate them more. The coach, and this actually relates to what Dan was saying, is that we need to hire coaches, and we need to rehire coaches that are there to fulfill the club's vision and to embrace and act in accordance with the club's values, beliefs, and philosophies. So If you have a coach that starts to work in using values that you don't agree with, work with them. If they continue, they're out. You can say to them, look, my friend, go and find a club that shares the same values that you do. But our club, we have very defined values. I had a coach in my club that he used press-ups and other exercise like that as punishment. He said one day, I was at the pool, actually just because of an accident, I was at the pool. He said, we, the coaching team, have decided that anyone that comes too late or anybody that doesn't help pull out the lane ropes has to do 20 press-ups. No, that isn't actually what our coaching philosophy in the club. We use press-ups to build up strength. We don't use press-ups to build up, to use as a punishment. We talk to him, we work with him. 2 weeks later, he's doing the same thing. He no longer works at the club. Simple. The other thing about this is not to be like mean, is that I work with coaches and help them grow. So I'll have a coach who's working with 14-year-olds, and when he is like fulfilled everything, he's learned everything and he wants to progress, I will help that coach either in my club or in another club in another town. I will help him find a new job so that he can continue his development. Because sometimes a coach will start to coach 14-year-olds like 18-year-olds because they want to coach 18-year-olds, but they don't have the opportunity. So I will say to a coach, hey, have you seen this job advertisement? I think you should apply for that. I'll give you a reference. I'll talk to the other club. They think that's strange, but I think that's natural. I will just bring in another coach that wants to work with 14-year-olds. Parents need to have a healthy skepticism and be supportive. Like I was saying before, don't just come in with blind faith that everything's going to be great. Ask questions. Talk about it. Talk to other parents, but don't just assume that everything is fine just because. And leadership can also create informal opportunities to talk and listen to athletes, parents, and other coaches. I had a chairman that used to come to the swimming pools and just sit next to parents and talk to them. They're the best forums for finding out if everything's okay or not. If you have a meeting where we say, yeah, we're going to talk today about are there any problems with our coaches? Well, that's a bit difficult one to start talking. If you just come and sit next to somebody for 5 minutes, how's it going? What do you think are the strong things about this coach? Anything that you kind of think is a little bit off? That's where you get to hear where things are not quite okay. And we all need to have a role in safeguarding our athletes. It's like everybody's role, but let's try and safeguard before it's too late, and rather than just having a process where we can actually call somebody if there's a massive problem. I think that's all I'm going to talk about. Thank you.